Hello again. I'm sometimes ticked off in the comments here when I suggest that somebody born to foreign parents and raised abroad in childhood can never be British in the sense that I myself am British. I've given the example of people like Kemi Badenoch, leader of the Conservative Party, Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, and chair of the BBC, Samir Shah. For some of those commenting on my videos, this is an outrageous suggestion. To such people, the only possible criteria for being British is the possession of a British passport. Anything other than that, any other definition, is white ethno-nationalist pseudoscience, the kind of mad doctrine espoused only by Trump supporters and paid-up members of Reform. Since our government now hands out British passports as casually as supermarkets distribute loyalty cards, this means that according to the government's own figures, in the year up to June 2025, 256,864 foreigners living in this country were magically transformed into men and women as British as you and I. Now, I know, and so does everybody else really, that this is quite mad and that no civil servant can really transform a Somali or Afghan into a British person. Let me give an example from my own social circle. I have a friend who was born in Israel and grew up on a kibbutz. She had lived in this country for almost 40 years and has a British passport. The idea, though, that she is British makes her laugh. She knows perfectly well that she's actually Israeli, regardless of what a passport might say. I have remarked before that I lived for a time in Sweden and might very well have acquired citizenship of that country and a passport to match. Would that have turned me into a Swedish person? Of course it wouldn't. I would simply be a British person with a Swedish passport. I suspect that everybody watching this video knows this anyway. Put like this, of course, the leader of the Conservative Party is Nigerian, the Home Secretary Pakistani, and the chair of the BBC is an Indian. So far, so good. What about children born to those who have become naturalised citizens of our country in this way, though? To what extent might we regard them as being British as a child born to British parents who were born themselves in Britain? Is there any difference between them? Again, the progressive perspective is that such children must all be seen as being equally British, and that any other way of looking at the case risks creating second-class citizens. I merely thought that it would be interesting to think about this, because to my mind it illustrates very neatly what happens when ideology comes up against common sense and logic, and ideology triumphs. In other words, everybody knows that those 250,000 foreigners are no more British after they are granted citizenship than they were before. But we all of us have to pretend that they and their children are as British as the rest of us. It requires what is known as the willing suspension of disbelief, I think.